Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It's my great pleasure and honor to have Batya Ungar-Sargon with us. Batya is the opinion editor of Newsweek, and before that, she was the opinion editor of The Forward. She's written in the New York Times, The Washington Post, Foreign Policy. She has authored 2 books, Bad News, How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy, and most recently, Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed Americans' Working Men and Women. And she holds a PhD from UC Berkeley as well. But most importantly, she's a person who is very much attuned to what's happening in this world with strong ideas, and it's always a lot of fun having a conversation with her. So thank you so much for joining me today, Batya.
It's such an honor to be here with you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
So I really want to pick up this morning or this afternoon on a simple thing, which is a very complicated topic. Recently, I had a person speak with me from the Hillels of Illinois who said that unfortunately, ever since the genie got out on campuses of anti-Semitism, he's not sure it's ever going to go back into the bottle. And I'm wondering what your feeling is about anti-Semitism in America. Will it go back to the way it was? Has it shifted, and is it now out there and something we're going to have to deal with in the intensity that we're experiencing today for the long term?
So I'm a little bit of a rising anti-Semitism skeptic. I live in Brooklyn. I'm part of the Frum community, and people may not remember this, but in 2019 and 2020, there was an epidemic of Frum Jews being beaten up in the streets of Brooklyn. 3/4 of the attacks were by young Black men. And nobody stood up for us. Nobody spoke up. Nobody had anything to say in defense of Frum Jews at the time. And so when I hear like left-wing or liberal Jews who, like, from the comfort of passing as regular people, did not experience anti-Semitism until now, I feel a little bit like, okay, it wasn't coming for you, but that doesn't mean it didn't exist. And so yes, it's more apparent in the elite spaces where liberal Jews tend to find themselves in the cultural liberal spaces, right? It's on university campuses. But the idea that somehow, like, everything was hunky-dory until now, I feel suspicious of that idea.
But just down the block in Teaneck, New Jersey, there were all sorts of incidents recently at the shul there, at one of the shuls at Keter Torah, where the rabbi was even threatened. There seems to be a more open sense of anti-Semitism. I understand on the university campuses, it is more public now because of the protests about the war. You really think that it hasn't gotten worse?
I think it has gotten worse at the symbolic level. So there's more chanting, there's more posts on social media, there's more speech around it. But as somebody who comes from our community, which experienced it in a very physical way just 2 years ago, I find it difficult to get exercised about this precisely because, Baruch Hashem, it is not translating into mass violence. There have been a few isolated violent incidents, 3 or 4. I'm counting them like very closely. But so far, it's people exercising their First Amendment rights, and much less so here than in Europe, for example, where it really is like on steroids. And part of the reason that's not happened here is because there's no buy-in from the American working class. So the people who are very exercised on behalf of Palestine are the elites, the leftist elites. Even the Muslim immigrants who come here, by and large, are middle-class people. And, as somebody who lives in a neighborhood that's sort of half Russian Jews and half Turkish immigrants, like, everyone just wants to get along. I mean, this really is like the golden Medina, and that's kind of a thing. People keep asking me, why did you write this book about like the working class? Like, why are you so invested in this? And there's a part of me that just feels such a deep sense of hakaras hatov to the average American who simply will not tolerate anti-Semitism.
Do you think we still have the Golden Medina, or is that something that is passing?
I think it more than I ever have in my life before.
Really? And so you would feel comfortable. In other words, people are saying that now is there should be an increase in there will be an increase in Aliyah and all of these. Is that more something from the media? Is it more, as you're suggesting, from the elites and not something that really narrows down into the regular day-to-day life of American Jews?
I think American Jews are being made to feel unsafe, and they're not unsafe because leftists are cowards and they don't actually attack people physically. They chant and they gather in groups and yell. And I'm sorry, like we're descended from the Maccabees. Like the idea that some yelling teenagers with purple hair on a college campus makes us unsafe offends me. We're not unsafe, but people are being taught to think that way. Students are being bullied and harassed. I'm not defending that behavior. It's terrible and it is deeply anti-Semitic. But you know what? It was never supposed to be easy to be a Jew. And like, if you can't stand up for that, I don't know what to tell you. And like it really is happening in like the most privileged places. So they thought like I got into Harvard and now I'm going to be protected by the same gross standard that they have for other minorities where you're not allowed to criticize them at all, right? And instead, Jews are getting the white treatment, right? They're being treated like other white students, which is to say they're being treated like they are part of the problem and their views are racist. Our response cannot be that it was okay to treat white kids this way, but don't you dare treat us that way. We demand the standard you have for the trans and for blacks and for other marginalized people. That cannot be our response. I find that just so antithetical to what it means to be a Jew and what it means to be an American.
And shifting for a moment, in the political world today, do you find the battles that are going on, are they good for the Jews, bad for the Jews, the fighting that's happening between both Democrats and Republicans, the fact that we have two presidential candidates who I think as of last night are they're official candidates of the two parties who the majority of people don't want to vote for. Is that something that is going to translate in any way uniquely to a Jewish community?
Well, I think if Trump wins, foreign policy will be a lot less chaotic, that's for sure. Uh, we hear this narrative a lot, right? Like people tell pollsters, "Oh, I wish there was another candidate." But at the end of the day, millions of people showed up in primaries to vote for these two guys. The people who are voting for Trump are very excited to do so, and the people who are voting for Biden, they had many alternatives. It wasn't like he was alone. I mean, there were other people that they could have chosen. So I think actually people do, like they want these two guys. They just wish they were both younger and less crazy or kind of um handicapped. I don't want to belittle the president because I don't think it's nice to talk about his mental state in that way, but they would they you couldn't ask for a better representation of the two sides, right? Of the big debate, the big political debate. Like Nikki Haley was part of an older version of the GOP and she was completely trounced despite the fact that she outspent Trump 2-1. So you're asking me, is it good for the Jews? Well, what's good for the Jews is democracy. I firmly believe that. I mean, that's, as long as we're not living in Israel, like I'm probably in Israel as well, but, the democracy is the thing that protects us, civil rights. And I mean, what a better sign of the strength of a democracy that a candidate can be outspent 2-1, can have the entire establishment of both sides trying to destroy him, and he still comes out because people just showed up and vote for him. So to me, that really bolstered my faith in American democracy. And I think that is good for the Jews. And the squabbling between the parties, I just don't take it that seriously. I think because for my book Second Class, I traveled around the country and interviewed people from all walks of life, working class Americans who are conservatives, who are liberals, who voted for all the parties, different industries, and people were just so post partisan, like they so did not care about this. They didn't identify with either party. They were just trying to live their lives. And to the extent that Jewish people can be part of the solution, part of the sort of stitching back together of the fabric of American society, that will be very good for us.
But have we lost in America what used to be called the Judeo-Christian ethic? Once upon a time, it seemed like there were the values of America were very close to the Jewish values, and now it seems like values of America have shifted drastically. Can we regain that? Or was that also something that was ephemeral and we just imagined?
I'm gonna say something that I only feel like I can say because like we're mishpacha and this is like within the family. Like I would never say this like on TV or in public. I think the liberal Jewish community, um, they're very overrepresented as college educated. They go to fancy universities. They're very proud of their credentials, and so many of them have bought into the ideology that has led to this rise in anti-Semitism, this rise in anti-Zionism. Like they thought they could be progressives and support Israel. The price of being a progressive and a leftist is denouncing your Judaism. And for so long, they pretended that that wasn't the case. I mean, that became obvious to me in 2019. It's been obvious to many people much longer than that. I mean, even I was late to the game. And it just, they thought that that ideology, you could just, it's not that the progressive movement is right about everything and accidentally wrong about Israel. And if they could just change their minds on Israel, it would be perfect. No, they're wrong about Israel because they're wrong about everything. And sadly, the liberal Jewish community is deeply enmeshed in that worldview. It has adopted that worldview that is so anti-America, and it was always anti-America and it was always anti-Semitic, but they didn't pick up on the anti-Semitic part. But it wasn't okay when it was anti-America. And I honestly, Rabbi, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I'm so struggling with how, like, Avas Yisrael at a time when it is so clear to me that we participated in like selling ourselves down the downstream. And so many people who like attacked me in 2019 for coming to this realization, I see them out there after October 7th. Now they realize it. By the way, I didn't get a single apology from people who called me racist for realizing this, 4 years ago. They realized the same thing, not one apology, but anyway, who's counting? But I'm struggling with what to do with this because we have to love every Jew. And yet it's not just the liberal Jews. I mean, there's so many now who are part of this anti-Zion. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Oscars speech, this man standing up there and saying, I refute my Jewishness. I mean, like, how do you love a person like that who's giving succor and comfort to our enemies? It's very, I'm struggling with this.
Do you find that though also at the extreme right, where you have the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism? In other words, is it a function of the extremes versus the center, going back to the working class men and women in the middle? Is are you just looking at the left? Should we also be looking at the far right?
It exists on the far right. It's marginalized on the far right. It's a tell, like people don't like to hear it. And you're seeing it. You see like, people turning on Israel on the far right. It's not, as far as I can tell, and I'm watching it very closely, it does not seem to me to be seeping into the mainstream, which is amazing because many on the right are extremely frustrated with the funding going to Ukraine. And there's like a natural, I think wrong, but a natural kind of hekesh there where you say like, okay, no more funding foreign wars in Ukraine. And people could easily have then said, and Israel, and they didn't. And again, like the level of hakaras hatov we owe these people, like you have to think about the average like working class conservative, right? They hate Democrats. They hate them. They think they're all like a bunch of like no good nicks, godless pedophiles. They think they're all pedophiles. And yet they don't hate Jews. Like even though Jews are 75% of Democrats, like they'll say to me with like real pain in their eyes, like, explain to me how is it that Jews can be Democrats? Like they don't even hold it against them. They're so philo-Semitic and it's so rare. And there's this guy in England just won an election, George Galloway. This guy like hates Israel. He's an anti-Zionist. He's like Corbyn. He's on the far left and he just hates Israel. And he won because the working class is fed up of being sold out by both parties. That would never happen here. You could never have a right-wing populist politician who would say something against the Jews and would be able to capitalize on that.
So there are boundaries, and the boundaries of the far right are different than the boundaries of the far left in terms of the Jewish community.
I think the left, the ideology on the left that has led to all this anti-Semitism is one that many progressive Jews themselves hold. And it's sort of, it's not fair because I think Biden is doing his best to hold the line. I can't help but, the conservatives are very upset. They say he's waffling on Israel. He is waffling on Israel, but he's waffling in such a minor way, given what the pressure from his kind of, from within his part. Now, I don't think that pressure is real. You're seeing like young people are flocking to Trump. He's now doing better than Biden on young people. He's doing better than Biden with people of color. Hispanics are now voting more for Trump than for Biden. He's surging with Black voters. I really don't think that like Israel is going to be the wedge issue that the leftist media wants it to be. But at the same time, everyone is telling Biden that Israel is a problem for him. And honestly, he could have just been so much worse. At the beginning, he was amazing. He's not amazing now. But again, this theme of Hakar Zatov. But Rashida Tlaib and AOC and Ilhan Omar are still treated as celebrities on the left. Whereas Candace Owens is trying to get fired. That's why she's saying this stuff. She's out. I mean, there's no wellspring of support for this on the right. There's a marginalized far right contingent that is very separate from even like the regular far right. Whereas on the left, these ideas are very, very mainstream.
Would you imagine American politics moving back towards the center? In other words, right now, both candidates are are beyond the center. They're either to the right or to the left, depending on the candidate. Are we going to get more towards moderation, or is that happen in a different way?
Okay, so this is like definitely my hottest take. I actually think Trump is a centrist. If you look at his policy, um, he sounds more like a 1990s Democrat than he does like a Reaganite or, a far right candidate. So if you look at where he is on abortion, he supports a legal abortion until 16 weeks, which is where 80% of Americans are at. If you look at his stance on the border, that we should have a secure border to protect American workers, that was the Democrats' position in the 1990s. He's pro-gay. He's courting Black voters very actively. He got $45,000 from the Teamsters Union, so he's courting union workers. I mean, this is a man who, like, what, from policy point of view, you'd be hard pressed to point to something that he is promoting or supports that is not in concert with where 70% of Americans are at, the kind of median line. And he did this throughout the primary, running to the left of all of the other candidates, which is, of course, why his voters love him. To leftists, to Democrats, to liberals, Trump is an extremist. But to Trump's voters, Trump is a liberal and they love him for it.
But don't they also love him because he's unpredictable, or you'll excuse me, comes off like a Meshuggah? Uh, and is there that appeal because of that? He'll say anything, things that other people would want, which is also the reason why he's off-putting, because you don't know what's going to happen next. The fact that he can demean people so easily and make up names, and it's not a nice guy. If he was in school, he'd be on detention.
Yeah, he's not a nice guy. And shout out to my mom, Sarah Unger, who she saw Trump one day in 2015 making fun of a disabled reporter. And that was it for Sarah Unger. She's never once voted for him, even though she only votes on Israel. And he's very good on Israel. She can't bring herself to do it because she finds his personality so abominable. I think, two things I would say. The first is I don't think it's the unpredictability. I think it's the lack of a filter. They're so sick of being lied to. They're just so sick of the politicking and the every person thinking how to phrase it in order to get by with this can and this one and this camp. And they're so sick of that because in their mind, they're constantly being lied to. And so to them, that reads as honesty, like that they can trust what he's going to say because he's not filtering what's coming out of his mouth. And the other thing I would say is, when Trump ran in 2015 and again now, he wasn't just taking on one side or one party. He was taking on the orthodoxy of both sides on trade, on immigration, on all of these liberal issues where the Republicans had moved to the right. he was taking on the consensus on both sides when it came to the economy and the culture wars on the right and on the left. You have to have a certain kind of personality to be able to say, with no one behind me, you know, I'm going to take on both sides. I don't think a nice person can do that. I don't know that I could do it. I mean, it's in this tiny way, I end up doing that because if you want to be in the center, everyone's going to attack you. But for a president to do that, to say, I don't need the support from my party, I don't need the support from the other party, I'm going to do what the American people sent me here to do. You have to kind of have a personality where you don't care how you come off.
And the comments about Putin, the comments, the latest report, whether it's true or not, from Kelly's book about his admiration of some aspects of Hitler's personality or accomplishments, those things aren't things that the Jewish community should be concerned about?
No, I mean, I think, first of all, the Abraham Accords, Israel would not be able to do what it's doing right now if the Abraham Accords had not happened. I mean, like Trump saved Israel. If there is no way that without the Abraham Accords, Israel could have gotten as far as it's gotten in Gaza. And by the way, you notice not a peep out of the UAE or Bahrain, not a peep. And the Saudis are still considering normalization. In fact, they're desperate for it. They're desperate for this to be over so they can pursue it. The Arab street has completely abandoned the Palestinians because of Trump. And there's just no way to, I mean, how do you ever, the number of Israeli Jewish lives that he will have saved with this, it's beyond comprehension. It's just beyond calculation. The thing about Putin, I don't know. I know I'm supposed to hate him. This is a man who changed the calculation for Jews in Russia. And he's a murderer, he's a thug, he doesn't believe in democracy, but he changed the calculation for Yidden in a country that was so deeply anti-Semitic. And he showed up and said, actually, we're not doing that anymore. And covered the Jews with his protective aura. I don't know why. Hashem obviously wanted that to happen, but I just can't hate somebody who did that for our people. I just can't. And I know that I'm supposed to, but it's, I don't approve of a lot of what he does, but I think that what Trump likes is a strong ally. He likes Israel because it's strong. And I just don't take it seriously. I think a lot of Trump's, language, his kind of, undignified, let's call it, language, is to keep himself in the headlines with the liberal press that hates him. That he doesn't do that for his base. He does that to kind of trigger the other side so that they're always talking about him.
So, switching gears for a minute, you're the opinion editor of Newsweek, and you have strong opinions of your own. How do you balance the journalistic requirements with your own opinions?
It's very hard. We run the daily debate at Newsweek. Every day I pick the one topic that's the most important topic of the day, and we try to get two sides on it so that the reader comes to Newsweek and sees, oh, they respect me as well. Whatever side you're on, we respect your view and we want to hear it. So honestly, at the forward, this was much harder because at the forward, like for some reason, the like if I would run somebody and then I would say something on TV, or something, I didn't go on TV that much, but if I would tweet something or write an article that they didn't agree with, then they would then attack me. Like, it's like, why? I don't get that anymore. They really believe in the mission. They understand.
So it works, you're saying.
Yeah, our writers are all like super into the mission. And I also think that there's been a sort of, the tide has really turned. People are understanding how important the class component is on both sides. So there's less pushback, I would say, than there used to be.
So if I would look at Newsweek typically, would I view Newsweek as a right of center, left of center, center publication?
So if you just looked at the publication, you would find equal amounts on both sides. You would see the daily debate within of itself. Hosting debates is coded as center right today because the left is so much less interested in hosting debates.
And then I guess my last question, we only have a few minutes left. you're hopeful.
Yeah.
And are you hopeful because you're Jewish, or you're hopeful because despite being Jewish?
I'm hopeful because I think Hashem is the best. And always, there's no Hashem's the best.
And it's gonna work. It's gonna work. I apologize for the technical difficulties we had in the middle, but this has been fascinating for those who were following and are following and will be following. Obviously, strong opinions, not the opinions you always hear in the Orthodox Jewish community, but that's what makes these conversations so much fun. Because Batya, you're an astute observer, and I truly appreciate your viewpoint. I don't always agree with everything you say, but I guess that's what makes it so much fun in this. I look forward to future conversations. I encourage everybody, if they haven't had a chance, to read your book, Second Class How to Trade Americans, Working Men and Women. It's a great read, and it's well written, and it really has an important message to be said. So thank you for taking of your time and sharing it with us today.
Thank you so, so much, Rabbi. It was really an honor.
It was a pleasure to have. And Purim Sameach. It should be a Freilich and Purim with a couple of Nahafochos, please.
Amen.
Bye bye. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.